Welcome to Keto Meals and Recipes.com. Today I'm going to be making my pumpkin spice snickerdoodle cookies, a version of a traditional New England cookie, but with a little bit of a difference. However, if you do like the classic crinkle cinnamon spice version, I will be providing instructions of what changes you need to make as I'm making this cookie. So please continue watching. But if you want something a little bit different and more seasonal, I hope you will give this a try. If you're not familiar with Snickerdoodles, these are old-fashioned cookies which are basically round, brown, and very plain looking. And they're made with very simple ingredients. But in spite of their outer appearance, don't let these cookies fool you into thinking they're just ordinary cookies. They're absolutely not. When you bite into the cookie, you'll notice that the texture has a nice crispy edge and exterior. And it's not really a crispy cookie, but just has a little bit of firmness on the outside. But the inside texture is pillowy and soft and melt in your mouth. And with the wonderful pumpkin spice flavor, it just gives this cookie a nice little alternative while still maintaining the tangy taste and, of course, the cinnamon sugar exterior. I think these pumpkin spice snickerdoodles are a perfect fall, Thanksgiving, holiday, well, actually anytime snack. As you watch the entire video, as always, I will not only explain what I'm doing, but this time I will also provide a bit of food history because I think it's a lot of fun to know the origin of certain recipes. The other point I'd like to mention is that these snickerdoodles are, first of all, easy to make. They're keto, sugar-free, gluten-free, and unless you have certain nut allergies, this recipe can be shared with almost anybody, not just people following the keto diet. Now, the macronutrient ratio for these cookies is 3.9 to 1, with 2.3 grams of total carbs, 1.4 grams of dietary fiber, resulting in only 0.9 grams of net carbs per cookie. And each cookie starts with 20 grams of dough, or about 1 tablespoon. To be efficient and to make sure you have all the ingredients, before starting, assemble and weigh out all of your ingredients. Then to a mixing bowl, add your room temperature butter and granulated sweetener. You don't have to pre-grind this sweetener. Then you can either mash things together with a silicone spatula. You can do this entire recipe manually, but I'm going to use the paddle attachment on my stand mixer in order to cream the butter. That's because my wrist gets a little bit tired. When you're using the stand mixer paddle, it should take about 2 or 3 minutes of whipping until the butter and sugar are really nicely combined and creamed together, and you can see the difference in the butter. It's a bit paler. Because your butter will stick to the bowl, don't forget to stop and scrape the sides and the bottom of the bowl. So as this is happening, let me tell you the first bit of food history. Did you know that snickerdoodles are also called snipdoodles or cinnamon sugar cookies? The first noted version of this cookie recipe was believed to have originated from New England in the late 1800s. And it's also believed that they're either Dutch or German in origin. Okay, the butter has been creamed, so let's get to the next step. To a small mixing bowl, add the eggs and then whisk with your fork just to combine the yolks and the whites. Add your vanilla and whisk to combine. Now pour the egg mixture into the butter mixture and blend to combine. At this point, you'll notice that the eggs and the butter look a bit curdly, but don't worry about that. It just means my butter was a little bit cooler than my eggs. But don't worry, because when you add the dry ingredients, it will all come together into a nice dough. Now it's time to place your fine mesh sieve over your mixing bowl, to which you will add your dry ingredients. Here I'm starting with the almond flour, the coconut flour, the glucomannan, which is your binding agent for the cookie, your cream of tartar, which is absolutely necessary, and the baking soda. I'm also adding the finely ground salt and the cinnamon powder, ginger powder, and I always prefer to grate my nutmeg from a nut because it tastes so much better. But if you don't have a nut, use a really good quality powdered nutmeg. At this point, also add the ground clove. Then whisk or stir the dry ingredients in the sieve in order to help them pass through the sieve. This is also a really good step because it aerates the dry ingredients, especially the more wet and clumpy almond flour. As well, it combines the ingredients really nicely so you don't get pockets of baking soda or whatever. Okay, here's a couple more interesting facts about these cookies. Did you know that cream of tartar is actually the acid byproduct of winemaking? And cream of tartar is an important ingredient that gives the Snickerdoodles their very distinct tangy flavor. So as I said, you can't skip this one. Otherwise, you'd just be making a sugar cookie. Also, another use for cream of tartar is when you're making meringues, such as lemon meringue pies or any meringue pie, and pavlovas. Please leave me a comment and let me know if you'd like me to make either of these two recipes. But as I also mentioned, you do need baking soda because the baking soda will react with the cream of tartar. And both of these ingredients are important to get that classic Snickerdoodle flavor and texture. Now I'm going to fold the sifted dry ingredients with the egg mixture until everything is well combined. Make sure you scrape from the bottom and sides so that everything mixes very well. When your dry and wet ingredients are combined, stop at that point. You don't want to overmix because that'll make the cookies denser and harder. And one of the things you want is a nice pillowy texture on the inside. When I make these cookies, I find that my cookie dough is just a little bit too soft to work with. So what I'm going to do is just cover the dough in the bowl with a bit of cling wrap and refrigerate for about 30 minutes. You don't really need to chill it, you just need it to harden up a bit. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to make my cinnamon sugar for the coating. For that, all you have to do is combine the granulated sweetener and the cinnamon in a bowl and stir together until you have a nice homogeneous mixture. Also, I'm going to take a moment and go to my stove and preheat it to 360 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius. And because I don't like cleaning up my trays, I'm going to place a piece of parchment paper on my baking sheet. Now that my dough has been in the fridge for 30 minutes, I'm going to weigh out 20 grams, which is about 1 tablespoon scoop, well actually just a little under 1 tablespoon scoop of this dough. I'm going to scoop out all of the dough, and the next thing I'm going to do is to take each of the scoops and roll it into a ball, and then also roll each of the cookie dough balls in the cinnamon sugar that I prepared earlier. By the way, use a bowl like this because it'll make it much easier for you to roll without making a big mess. And after you've coated each of the dough balls, place that ball onto the parchment-lined cookie sheet. Because these cookies will spread a little, make sure that you leave enough room between each of the balls, about 2 inches or 5 centimeters between each of the cookies. And then just repeat until all the dough has been rolled into balls and coated. What I'd like to do next is to very gently press down on the dough balls to flatten them just a bit. Some people do this, some people don't. This is how I like to do it. After having completed all of that, place the cookie sheet into the middle position of your preheated oven and set the timer for 10 minutes. Depending on your oven, it may take a few extra minutes, so you'll have to check. And what you're looking for to determine if these traditional New England Snickerdoodle cookies are done, you'll note that the edges are nice and crispy and they've stopped expanding. When you take the tray out of the oven, you'll notice that the center of the cookies are still puffy at the top and in the center. In other words, they kind of look like they have a small dome on top. This dome will actually disappear as the cookies cool. And now that my cookies are done and I've removed the tray from the oven, I'm just going to let the cookies rest on the cookie tray for about 5 minutes or so, just to let them cool down for a bit because they're quite crumbly. Because we want the cookies to crisp up and cool evenly, transfer the cookies onto a wire cooling rack and leave them alone until they are completely cooled to room temperature. These cookies don't have to be left overnight to be enjoyed, but you do have to leave them for about a half an hour. Now my cookies have had time to cool, so I'm going to take a bite and enjoy this lovely taste. I wish you were here and could enjoy with me both the taste of these cookies and how wonderful the kitchen smells. And to end this video, here are a couple final comments I would like to share with you. The next thing I'm going to do is give you 2 substitutions. The first one, if you don't have all the individual spices to make your own pumpkin spice mix, as I've indicated, substitute the cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, and clove for a total of about 2.5 tablespoons of prepared pumpkin spice mix. But I also like to mention that if you're using a prepared pumpkin spice mix, the taste will be slightly different. That's because every company has their own formula for their spice mix. So make sure you're using either a very good pumpkin spice mix or using the individual ingredients. As promised, if you want to make a classic cinnamon spice snickerdoodle, all you have to do is omit the pumpkin spice mix and substitute with 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, and this will give you the more classic snickerdoodle cookie. Although I love treats and love to bake, I find that sometimes I just want something quick and easy. So since I'm making 26 of these amazing cookies, I'm going to take a baker's dozen, which by the way is 13 cookies. I'm going to place them in the freezer safe container and freeze them until I have a hankering for some cookies, or if they last that long, until the holidays, so that I have something very easy to pull out and make fresh cookies for my guests and family. To everyone, thank you very much for watching my video tutorial. And if you like my videos, please give it a like, subscribe, share my channel or recipe with someone that you think might also like this recipe. And I keep forgetting to say, but please turn on your notification bell, otherwise you won't get alerted that I've posted another recipe, which I do at least once a week. And lastly, the link for the printable written recipe is posted in the description below, as well as a list of the ingredients I used. And I hope to see you next time when I post my next video. Cheers!